This is Books of Titans, the podcast dedicated to the influences of influencers. The books that have helped shape prominent inventors, business leaders, athletes, intellectuals, scientists, and others. We'll talk about what makes these books such classics, and at least attempt to have an intelligent discussion about what makes them so important and influential.
As I approached the annex, the deep boom of gunfire reverberated off the surrounding buildings. Standing on the bike's pedals, I coasted and scanned the area ahead of me. A man wearing dark clothes appeared in the middle of the road. He walked toward me, holding a long gun at his waist. As he walked, he fired toward the housing area to his right, then swung the weapon to his left and fired towards the hospital. My field of view shrank. I had tunnel vision, focused solely on the man on the road. I veered right, gliding the bike up onto the sidewalk in front of the annex. I leapt from the bicycle. Momentum carried me forward as I grasped my pistol, unsnapped the holster strap with my thumb, and drew my Beretta. I knelt on the sidewalk, sat back on my right foot, and braced my left elbow on my left knee. I was in the open. Instinctively, I thumbed the safety lever on my pistol upward, ensuring that it was in the fire position. As I gripped the pistol with both hands and steadied it in line with my target, my eyes never left the gunman, but I was aware of movement around and behind him, people scurrying and crouching behind cars, and what looked like a person lying exposed behind a vehicle about 125 yards down the road. I yelled, "Police, drop your weapon, put it down." He continued moving toward me and fired again to his side. I didn't see anyone in his line of fire, though I knew I needed to stop him. I also knew shooting at him would endanger others in the area. I yelled again, "Police, drop it, put it down now." He picked up speed, almost running at an angle toward me and toward the annex. He slowed and took a more deliberate aim, firing in my direction. I felt a sense of relief. The threat he posed outweighed the danger of me shooting in the vicinity of innocents. Without conscious thought, my index finger slid inside the Beretta's trigger guard. My finger pressed the trigger as I tracked the threat. Hello, this is Eric Rostad coming to you right outside of Nashville, Tennessee. And today I'm going to cover the book where that quote just comes from. And that is Warnings Unheeded by Andy Brown, Twin Tragedies at Fairchild Air Force Base. This is book 19 of 52 for my 2019 reading list. This episode will consist of 3 segments. The first will be a brief introduction of the book. Second segment will be a question and answer with the author himself, as a first for this podcast. And the final segment will be the one thing, my one key takeaway from this book. So let's jump into segment 1 here. The author, Staff Sergeant Andrew P. Brown. He goes by Andy, and he's an Air Force law enforcement veteran who now works for the Department of Homeland Security. As for who suggested the book, it was suggested by the author himself, Andy. He sent me a copy of the book, and he said he thought I'd enjoy the book whether I ended up covering it on the podcast or not. And so as part of this project, I'll receive books throughout the year from authors or from their publicists, and in the hopes that I read them or will cover them on the podcast. And I do try to include 1 or 2 books a year that have been sent to me. And there's a few reasons I do that. First, if I ever become an author and write a book, I start sending the book to people, I would hope for the same treatment back, to where people would read it, they would provide feedback. So that's the first reason. And the second reason is that some of the best surprises so far have been in these books that have been sent to me. They're not ones that I would have come across in any other way. And so the fact that they were sent to me caught me in a way that I wouldn't have otherwise. And I really enjoyed the books and got a lot out of them. So I read this book between May 30th and June 2nd of 2019. I'm recording this June 6th, so just 4 days ago is when I finished it. It's a 324-page book. That means I read 108 pages per day. It took 8 hours, 20 minutes, and 41 seconds, which averages out to 1:33 per page. I know it may seem dorky to track that, but I really like seeing how different books, how long they take, and then I can kind of gauge my excitement level of the book by how many pages I've read per day. And in this one, 108 per day is well on the high end of the spectrum. I need to be reading about 48 per day to get through all 52 of my books this year. So if I'm reading 108 pages in a day, I'm really into the book. I can't put it down, and I am sacrificing sleep to read more of that book. The structure of the book follows what's called narrative nonfiction, which is fact-based storytelling that makes people want to keep reading. So basically, the author does a ton of research, covers the whole aspect, all different aspects of a particular story, but tells it in a way that it almost reads as fiction. It reads as a story. Some other books that have been part of the Books of Titans project that are also narrative nonfiction are The Things They Carried by Tim O'Brien and The Right Stuff by Tom Wolfe. This one starts out with the author Andy Brown revealing that he has just shot a gunman who is in the midst of a mass shooting at Fairchild Air Force Base in Spokane, Washington. This is in 1994, and the gunman's name is Dean Melberg, who has a history of mental problems. Was actually recommended that he be removed from the Air Force at least 5 different times and was never removed until the very end, until it was too late. And he has walked into a hospital at Fairchild and has just started shooting. He targets 2 doctors who played a role in suggesting that he be removed from the Air Force. He starts with killing them and then just kind of goes on a rampage. 4 days later, at the same Air Force base, a B-52 that is on a practice run before an upcoming air show crashes, killing all 4 pilots aboard. There's a saying that says there are old pilots and there are bold pilots, but there are no old, bold pilots. And Lieutenant Colonel Arthur Bud Holland, the pilot of the B-52, was an old, bold pilot. He was old in the sense that this was going to be his last air show. He was retiring after that. And he was bold in the sense that he did maneuvers in the B-52 that really shouldn't have been done. And this was a known thing. There were many times that it was suggested that he not be allowed to fly anymore. He had some close calls. And there were whole sets of pilots that would refuse to fly with him. And yet he continued to fly. And so as the title of this book suggests, warnings were definitely unheeded. In the case of the gunman, multiple issues with psychological issues and mental issues, and with the pilot doing things he should not have been doing as a pilot. There's a third story in this book, though, and that is of the author's role in killing the shooter. And not in the traditional sense of the heroics of the author, of look at me, I killed the guy, I stopped this gunman before he killed more people, but the story of the author's role and how that devastated his life, how he experienced severe trauma from that event, and how when he was attempting to get help, he got stuck in a catch-22, because if he sought help, he had to go to a psychologist. But if he went to a psychologist, he had to turn in his badge and gun, so he couldn't continue in his job. So his response was just to stuff the trauma, to stuff it deep inside. He began drinking, but none of this went away. It got to the point where he would do routine traffic stops, and he would go up to the person who he had just pulled over, and he would look down and realize that his hands were just shaking. And so this book became his healing process. It became his way of confronting the information from that day, seeing that he did all that he could have done, and to move forward. This book is his healing process. As for my initial reaction to the book, I could not put it down. As I stated before, I read through it rather quickly, and it struck a chord with me, and I'm not completely sure why, but I think a lot of it just has to do with the author's role in the event, and then the author's honesty in dealing with that after the fact. I bought the book from my uncle. My uncle's a B-52 pilot, and so just in reading about B-52s a lot in this book, just made me think of my uncle a lot, and so called him after finishing the book, and then bought him a copy as well. As for who should read the book, Well, if you're interested in narrative nonfiction, an intense book, really an exciting book in a lot of ways, but also a deep book on a lot of levels, this is a good book. If you're interested in looking at events that lead up to mass shootings or mass casualty events to see what could have been done to stop them, this is also a great book in that sense. And if you suffer from any type of trauma, it's a helpful book to see how Andy dealt with the trauma after this event. When beginning to read this book, Andy let me know that he would be available for any questions while I read the book. That was like music to my ears. I read so many different books where I'm writing questions in the margins, I'm writing in the back of the book, and just questions that come up as I'm reading the book. And I never get to ask the author, but I got to ask the author about this book. So that was a really neat experience for me. And so I called Andy a few days ago and recorded the call, and I'm going to share some of those clips from that phone call on different topics that are related to the book, but also related to Andy's life since this event. So the first thing I want to start off with is Andy's purpose for writing the book. He wanted to share his story, and like I said, the research into the story is what helped him to move on with his life and to make peace with himself. So here's a neat clip that describes his purpose for writing the book.
I felt that it was important to share my story so that others could benefit from my experience and learn what not to do in some cases, but also to explain about PTSD, because there seems to be a trend in the news where the headline is that somebody with PTSD committed this murder or attacked this person, and the media seems to be trying to make people afraid of people with PTSD or veterans, and I think that's unfair and it's not accurate.
Mm-hmm.
But also I wanted to help remove the stigma for people who are not seeking treatment because they're afraid that they're going to be judged.
Next, I wanted to know what it was like to research about the life of someone who you had killed. So I asked him directly about that.
In researching his life, did that make it harder to make peace with yourself and working through? You go through it, your PTSD after the event. Did that make it easier or harder in that process?
It was helpful to learn his history just out of curiosity, and it's good to dig into these incidents and be able to predict future ones based on somebody's behavior. But as far as helping me process the incident, I didn't find so much help in learning about him. It was more in researching the incident and writing out the difficult scenes, the scenes that troubled me, writing them and rewriting them and re-experiencing the incidents in a safe space was helpful. Every time I confronted a difficult scene and processed the emotion, it was easier to deal with and had less effect on me.
Because otherwise it's just in your head the whole time. If there's not an outlet for it, it's in your head.
Yeah, I spent so many years suppressing and trying not to think about it. Never really did take the time to process it, and also researching the incident helped answer any questions that were lingering. So,
mm-hmm. Yeah, I found that to be
just allowed me to process it.
Yeah, I found it really interesting when you said that. When you got the timeline and the tapes that allowed you to time everything out, that helped start the process of making peace with everything, because you knew at that point you had done everything you could. You had gone as fast as you could. Just a thing that popped in my mind is like the truth shall set you free. And just that was neat. I think a lot of people just try to hide and not want to get more details, but those details actually helped you to find peace with it.
Yeah, it was really nagging me. When I responded to the call of shots fired, I was 0.3 of a mile away, and I was on bike patrol that day. So I was experiencing the physiological effects where time slowed down, and I had tunnel vision and such. So afterwards, it just seemed like it took me forever to get there, and I was feeling a lot of guilt about the lives that I was unable to save. So that ate at me for quite a while. Like I was trying to figure out what I could have done differently or how I could have gotten there quicker.
Mm-hmm.
It took several years to get those tapes that you referred to, but according to them, I was able to determine that it only took less than 2 minutes from the first radio call to me radioing in that I had shot the gunman and he was down. And that's a pretty quick response time. And then I realized that I couldn't have gotten there any sooner, and eventually realized that I did everything I could and began the process of forgiving myself and learning to deal with the incident and not feel any more guilt.
I was really impressed with Andy's honesty about his PTSD, and he obviously struggled with it. There were many years where he ran to alcohol, where he just kind of stuffed it in instead of dealing with it. But he eventually did deal with it. He made peace with it, and he's much better now. And it made me think of some lines of another book that I just read, The Coddling of the American Mind. And here's some quotes from that. It is vital that people who have survived violence become habituated to ordinary cues and reminders woven into the fabric of daily life. Avoiding triggers is a symptom of PTSD, not a treatment for it. Cognitive behavioral therapists treat trauma patients by exposing them to the things they find upsetting. At first in small ways, such as imagining them or looking at pictures, activating their fear, and helping them habituate, grow accustomed to the stimuli. In fact, the reactivation of anxiety is so important to recovery that some therapists advise their patients to avoid using anti-anxiety medication while undertaking exposure therapy. That's the end of the quote there. But that made me think of Andy, and that's basically what he did with this book, is he confronted the evidence, he confronted the events of that day, the timeline, and he realized that he had done everything that he could. And so this book is just neat in that sense, that it's his healing process in a way. Now I want to get into just a few other things that we discussed during the call. The first is, I asked him about the response of the survivors to this book, and here was his answer.
Been overwhelmingly positive. I had a lot of cooperation with the survivors and their families in researching the book, and a lot of them have contacted me and after reading it, saying that it had helped them, probably similar in a way that it helped me to just answer any of the questions that they had about it, and also to just help them process it.
One really interesting part of this book is when Andy gets into how media responded the day of the shooting. And one side note here, he mentioned that this didn't get a lot of play in the national media because this happened exactly during the OJ trial. So the OJ trial was blanketing news that entire time. I remember that. I do not remember these events in the news. So he said it only got national play for a couple of days. But when it did get play, especially at the beginning, they talked about the shooting as an unexpected event. And it's just such a contrast because you've just read this whole book about how it was not unexpected at all. People, his entire life had been saying, this guy's going to be one of those guys that shoots up a building. And it was just really interesting to then look at the media reports and see how off base they were when you had a lot more of the details that were contained in this book. So here's a clip of us discussing that.
I admire your project. It's pretty admirable reading that many books, and I don't know how you find the time.
Well, I like you, I gave up the news. I was
Yeah.
I was actually glad to see you talk about that, and I may talk about that in the episode a little bit because you had to give it up as part of the healing process, but then also your descriptions of what the news was saying that day and how far it was from reality, I think was just a good kind of case study. And the more I see that, I mean, even if I'm intimately connected with something and that gets in the news, like you know how off it is and how it's not even close to what actually happened.
Yeah.
And so I'd rather read a book like yours and kind of be able to look back and see what led to everything and not just get the news story of it. I'd rather read history. Like I just read some books about the Middle East. I'd rather read those to see what has led to where we're at right now, as opposed to reading something about Syria right now and not really having any context for it other than what that editor and that writer said about it. So I gave up news and I've pretty much mostly given up TV. So that's actually opened up a lot of time for the reading. So
Yeah, it would. It's probably better for your mental health as well.
yeah, especially with the news. I mean, I used to read the paper every day and you know would watch the cable news and stuff, and it's just I don't think it's very helpful.
No, it's not healthy to be exposed to that much negativity all the time.
Yeah.
Especially like you say, if it's not even accurate.
In this next clip, I tell Andy what one of the hardest parts of the book was for me to read, just in terms of the tragedy of it. And he offered a neat tidbit about the family member. So the co-pilot on the B-52 is Lieutenant Colonel Mark McGeehan, and he had actually he had gone up to his higher-ups and requested that Holland, the rogue pilot, the pilot who was at the helm and who crashed it, that he did not want to fly with him, and he said he should be grounded. And so McGeehan did not want his crew to ever fly with Holland again. And so McGeehan would fly with Holland so that his crew wouldn't have to. So Holland is in the plane, they're practicing for this air show, and McGeehan, who had tried to get him grounded, is in the plane. His wife and two boys are watching the B-52, and they see it crash. And can you just imagine what that family is thinking, where their father, their husband had tried to get this guy grounded, had tried to make sure that this would never happen, and here they're watching it and they see it happen. So neat interchange here that ends in a kind of a neat informational piece that I didn't know.
Man, one of the hardest things was to read the family members who are watching the plane crash.
Yeah.
Man, I just can't even imagine.
Yeah, especially the McGeehan family.
Yeah.
So they all knew what their dad was trying to do, and then to see him go down in a plane that he was trying to ground the pilot in the first place, it's really frustrating.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. Patrick McGeehan, the older son, he went into the Air Force Academy after he got out of college. Or actually, I think that's where he went to college. But he is out of the Air Force now, and he's a senator in West Virginia.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, he's a really honest politician that we wish we had more of. But I appreciate. I've been in touch with him, and I appreciate following his career.
Yeah.
Making a lot of
really
enemies
neat
in there.
Yeah, that's really neat.
In this last clip, I discussed with Andy the thing that was most disturbing to me about the whole story of the shooter. And that was that the morning of the day of the shooting, the shooter slept in till 1 o'clock in the afternoon. He was at a hotel, and he basically woke up at 1 p.m. and got a taxi and went over to the hospital and just started shooting. And it just, if you know you're going to do that, wouldn't you be awake? Wouldn't you be thinking about it? And he was just sleeping soundly. Like the hotel staff had to go in and wake him up. And it was just so disturbing to me. And so I discussed that a little bit here with Andy.
One of the most disturbing things about that day was that he slept into 1 o'clock.
Yeah. He was a weird dude. I think it was probably because he was staying out late at the strip joints and such.
Yeah.
But he had
still, like, if he knew he was going to do that, it just seems like he wouldn't be sleeping. I don't know.
Yeah, that's a good point, huh? That he was sleeping pretty soundly.
Yeah, like he slept through somebody had to come in the room to wake him up, and he had to pay an extra day at the hotel because he slept in so long.
Yeah. Yeah, I never really thought about that, but that just tells you about his mindset, that it didn't really seem to be on his mind much, as far as he wasn't worried about it.
Yeah. Well, and then everyone that saw him, they noticed during the shooting, noticed his eyes and just a vacant look. And oh man, yeah, it was hard to read about some of that, but also really important.
To finish out segment 2 here, I want to highlight a couple things that are in the afterword of the book. The first is this, the idea of running amok. And here's a quote from the afterword. Mass public murder is not a new phenomenon and has likely been happening since the dawn of civilization. One of the earliest known accounts was observed in Malaysia in the year 1516 by Portuguese writer and world traveler Duarte Barbosa. It was again observed in Malaysia by British explorer Captain James Cook in 1770. Both Cook and Barbosa recorded instances of lone tribe members armed with swords indiscriminately attacking fellow villagers without apparent cause. The unprovoked attacks would continue until the intervention of other armed tribesmen. The Malay referred to the phenomenon as mengamak, to make a furious and desperate charge. Today, the term is simply known as running amok. Running amok was at one time believed to be a cultural condition occurring only in primitive tribes. In 1849, amok was recognized as a psychiatric condition having two forms: bear amok, in which the perpetrator suffered from a depressive mood disorder and experienced a personal loss, and amok, in which the perpetrator suffered from a depressive, psychotic, or personality disorder and attacked out of revenge for a perceived insult or injustice. The thing that stuck out to me there was just that these things have always been going on, and guns make it a lot easier to do more damage in shorter time, but these things have always been going on. And so the very next page is how to prepare yourself as average citizens. You know, what do you do in these type of events? If you're somewhere and there is a shooter there. Law enforcement agencies tell people that they have the best chance of surviving an incident of mass public murder if they run, hide, or fight. And so run. Whenever you are out in public, get into the habit of noting the location of escape paths and exits. At the first sign of trouble, leave the area and put as much distance as possible between you and the threat as quickly and as safely as you can. Secondly, hide. If the threat is imminent and you cannot escape, find a place to hide, preferably one that will protect you from gunfire. If you seek shelter in a room, lock the door and block it with furniture or other obstructions. Once you have hidden, look around your environment for items to use as improvised weapons and continue to look for an opportunity to escape. And the last one is fight. If you are appropriately armed or otherwise capable, bringing the fight to the attacker is the quickest way to end the threat and save lives. Additionally, if you are unable to escape and have hidden and the threat is approaching and imminent, bring the fight to the attacker. If you are not appropriately armed, use improvised weapons and commit to the attack with sudden and violent aggression until the threat is neutralized. I think it's important to think about these things and to think about them before you would ever be in that situation, because chances are when you're in it, you're not going to be able to think clearly. And so it's important to think about that beforehand. And in segment 3, I'll even get into that a little deeper with my one thing. Now into segment 3 and the one thing, my one key takeaway from this episode. And it's a takeaway that I've had from other books, but it's something that stuck out to me a lot while reading Warnings Unheeded. And that's of daily habits. So I shared some comments with Andy and in my observations of daily habits in his life and how that led to his response. So I'm just going to play the clip exactly as it was in the phone call.
Well, one thing that stuck out to me in the book, and this is kind of, so there's been I'm on the 119th book now for the Books of Titans project. And so over those books, I've started to see some themes. And one of the themes is the importance of daily habits. And that I just kept thinking about that while I was reading your book, because you're talking about your earlier life, and you were very particular about getting things in order with your job and training and doing the right things, whether it felt safe or not. And you talk about some people saying, we're at a Air Force Base here, or we're at a base, like, calm down, we're safe. We're surrounded by military. We're surrounded by people who know what they're doing. And your mentality all the time was, I've always got to be prepared. I've always got to be ready. And so when I kept seeing those different tidbits of information throughout the book, and then that you were the first responder there and you shot the gunman, the choice hadn't been made. You didn't make the choice when you got that call. You made the choice many years ago, and you made the choice on a daily basis. And I also think that's important in these situations. And you have advice at the end of the book on different ways to handle it if anyone ever finds themselves in that kind of a situation. You've got the list of run, hide, and fight. But those things those have to be decided before you're in that situation. And it's kind of the thing of you're not going to be a hero in the situation if you're not a hero in your daily life. And so that's one of the things that impressed me the most in the book, was to see you doing the things necessary on a daily basis from a young age, to where when the time came, when that day came for you to get that call, you were ready, but you had made that decision well before.
Yeah, the people who respond accordingly in times like incidents like that, under stress, they have thought about it ahead of time. And the incidents like that don't happen often enough to where you should worry about them, but they do happen often enough where you should have a plan in place before they occur. Because if not, you're going to be wasting precious seconds trying to decide if it really is happening, and then trying to think what you should do. And by that time, it's too late. Yeah.
Well, and then you spoke about one of the guys who had been in the building when Judah was in there, and then when he was out of the building, he started, or maybe that person was even outside of the building, but started helping, and all of that person's training came back to them at that moment. And it was kind of a similar thing where they had been trained in medical, and the person said they didn't even think about it. It was unconscious. They just started helping people, and they knew what to do. All the training that they had came back in that moment. And it kind of reminded me of that too, of putting that practice in beforehand, in even if it's for training or something like that, and it comes back at the right time.
yeah, you're just on autopilot because you've thought about it or practiced it so much. You don't have to. You've thought about it ahead of time. You don't have to think about it when it's time to use it. Yeah.
That clip makes me think of David Goggins in that time he was running and a car pulled up next to him and said, "What are you training for?" And Goggins replied with life. Just those daily habits, and that's what's going to lead to a better chance for the right response at the time when it's most needed. But those decisions are made when no one's watching. They're made when it's hard to do them. And you're not going to be a hero in the time where it's required if you're not a hero in the drudgery of daily life. That's a theme I see throughout the books I read, and it's one that pops up quite a bit in the Books of Titans books so far. So it's neat to see it again in this book, and to see it in Andy's life. And he would get crap from people all the time of you're taking this way too seriously, you're way too prepared and all that, and he was always like, something could happen at any time. And so he was the person that was there, and he took out that shooter, and it was not by accident. That the shot he took was 70 yards away. American football field is 100 yards. So if you're in the end zone, the guy that he shot was at the 30-yard line, but at the 30-yard line on the opposite side of the field. And he hit him. So it was an impressive shot. So to recap, really interesting book. I couldn't put it down, and just a lot of things to think about with mental illness, PTSD, even thinking in your own life of situations you come in contact with where there's things that are not right. And do you stand up at that point? Do you say something? Do you try to stop the things that are not right? There were a number of situations in this book where people could have stopped these two men, and they didn't. And a lot of destruction occurred because of that. That's going to do it for this episode. I want to thank Andy Brown, the author, for the phone call, for sending the book. And it was just a delight to be able to speak to him. Just a reminder that you can share your reading list on the Books of Titans podcast, actually on the Books of Titans website, by going to booksoftitans.com/mybooks. You can also follow Books of Titans on Instagram or Twitter @Books of Titans. And if you haven't already done so, you can subscribe to this podcast and find all of our past episodes through iTunes, the Android Marketplace, or your podcast manager of choice. If you're enjoying the podcast, please make sure to give it a 5-star rating in iTunes and share your favorite episodes on social media. We'll be back next week with another book. And until then, keep reading, keep learning, keep listening. I'm out.